So I wanted to talk about the new Cult of the Lamb and Don't Starve crossover because it's a new thing. You know, that's what's happening and it's neato. So first things first, there's not really much to say about this update. There's a new trinket that's been added, the red crown from Cult of the Lamb. You can get this by fishing at the Oasis, and if you give it to Antlion, you can get some pretty cool blueprints. These blueprints let you craft 2 new turfs and 1 new structure, and the 2 turfs are the brick road and the gold flooring. The brick road is effectively a cobblestone alternative skin, but it requires the same things to craft it, and it still gives the small speed boost that a cobblestone floor does. The gold flooring is purely cosmetic and requires primarily gold to make, so those two are kind of whatever. Having new flooring is really only good for mega basers for the most part, and as a result, I'm about it. I don't really like how the cobblestone turf looks, or at least not in as high of a quantity as you usually see it in mega bases, so having an alternative is pretty good. The third item is something that isn't purely cosmetic. There's a new statue slash fire pit type of deal, which starts as a decrepit little altar that gives a small sanity bonus when you're near it. This can, however, be upgraded with Cult of the Lamb's key crafting items, those being stone and wood. You need cut stone for its second stage, and as well as wood, and gold, cut stone, and wood for its third. The sanity aura becomes that of the cistern at its highest stage, and can be seen as purely an upgrade to the fire pit, since it provides sanity and can contain more fuel, as well as provides all of the bonuses that a normal fire pit would. So that's all well and good, but there is one key issue that I have with these items, and it's something that I don't think is a hot take by any means. Why is this locked behind summer? In my opinion, there is no reason for this to be locked behind fishing and antlion. The items themselves are nice to an extent. Having an easy sanity station would be great since there aren't really many early game options for that. And I could definitely see this being useful for managing sanity early on if you're a new player. On the other hand, it does use up a deceptively large amount of resources, a bit over a stack of rocks in total, which early game is used in most everything. So it can be seen as a bit of a noob trap in that regard. But even then, at least having the option to make this early on would go a long way for increasing its usage. The way I see it, this structure is really useful for newer players and early on, but because it's locked behind summer, it means you have to go through fall, winter, and spring, which you could easily get sanity regen alternatives, such as a top hat, a tam o'shanter, or even just setting up mushroom planters for green caps. On top of all that, summer is typically the time people will go into the ruins for things like star callers and the like, which ends up being a good light and sanity source on its own. But even before summer, people tend to already have lanterns and miner hats for light, and a skilled furnace to cook on and for heat, at least if they're well experienced. Ultimately, it just puts the idol in a weird position where people who would use it probably wouldn't get the chance to because it's locked behind basically a full in-game year. And this game is really hard for people who don't know what they're doing early on. So the people who would benefit from it probably just aren't going to use it because they're not going to get the chance to. And the people who do know what they're doing won't make it because they just have alternatives already that they can rely on. It's a very weird position for the item to be put in, and in my opinion should be giving a better alternative. Like giving a trinket to Pig King or something could be pretty beneficial for the item's usability. And then being able to find the trinket in graves and tumbleweeds would go a long way for it. But that's all there really is in regards to the new update. It's bite-sized just like they said it would be, but I was kind of hoping for more if I'm being honest. I won't say no to more mega base options though. If nothing else, it's a good set of skins that we get, and I'm never going to say no to free skins. I think a lot of people also kind of share in the opinion that it should have probably been a little more, or at least they were hoping for it to be a bit more. The Terraria update really has set the bar kind of high, all things considered, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but in this case, I do think it sets a kind of unhealthy precedent in which, you know, if the game's going to cross over, it feels like there should be like a boss or a new item and things like that. I don't know. I feel very conflicted about whether or not I should be expecting more. But that's all I really have to say about it. In the forum post though, they did mention how they're currently trying to work on a new update. And because this update wasn't enough to warrant me making a whole video, but too long to make it into a short, I figure I can say something about what I hope for in the skill tree update of my main, Winona. For starters, I do think that Winona is going to be soon in the next set of skill tree updates, because she's a character who probably aged the worst in regards to her skill tree. You know, I won't sugarcoat it, she's a swap character with low commitment to swapping back to her, which does make her better as far as being a swap character goes, since you don't have to constantly go back and forth as you would with a character like Warley. However, this does make her worse when it comes to the way the character is designed. Let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is the swap issue. I did touch on it, but the issue with Winona currently is that people only see her as a means to an end. You play as Winona to make her farms, and you don't play her after that because there's just no reason to. This leads people down two lines of thought, and one of those I think is a lot more harmful to the character than the other, but it's the easiest solution to the problem. Whenever people are asked on how to fix Winona, the most widespread solution seems to be just make her the only character that's able to operate her own structures, which on paper is a fine idea. It's definitely the option that is immediately apparent when you propose the problem to people, but it'll have some really harmful consequences to it that I don't think many people consider. And as one of the only two Winona mains in the community, I feel like I should bring up what those problems are. Winona as a character is inherently very costly to get set up. She needs tons of rocks and other resources just to properly set up each of her farms. Let's set up one of Winona's iconic farms, for example, the Varg farm. Each Varg farm uses up a minimum of 2 catapults, with most people choosing to run them at 4 instead. So this means that at its cheapest state, you're going to need to have a minimum of 36 rocks for the 2 catapults and the 1 generator, going up to 66 if you do choose to use 4. Not to mention, if you're not farming the resources for things like end tables or farming tons of fossil pieces, you're going to need statues to make the farm itself. If you are setting up end tables and fossil pieces, however, just disregard this section. But when I set up my Varg farm, I tend to use up about 48 statues in total. Assuming that you're using marble or glass shards, that's 2 rocks per statue, meaning you're using 96 rocks in addition to the 36 for the catapults and generator. Heaven forbid that you use cut stone for this, because then it goes up drastically. Now with that information in mind, let's run a hypothetical. If I walk into your base and ask you for 132 rocks, what are you gonna respond with? Any sane person is gonna say, hell no. Why would you ever agree to that? There's nobody who would just throw away 132 rocks. Because that's a ton of rocks. That's over 3 stacks of rocks. But if you introduce a trade-off, that being I will take a little over 3 stacks of rocks and turn them into an infinite supply of gems, monster meat, and hound teeth. And on top of all of that, you will have access to them at all times whenever you'd want. All of a sudden, it becomes a much more understandable cost. Then it's a matter of I can benefit more from having all these resources instead of rocks that I'm not immediately using. That's where Winona shines, in a setting in which everyone benefits from it and where you can afford to use that many rocks. Winona is all about big investments for huge payoffs. Now let's say that she's the only one who is able to use her farms. Would you trade 3 stacks of rocks for an infinite supply of gems, monster meat, and hound teeth, but only when I'm both in the server and not doing anything in one particular point in time? That would take priority over me farming that thing that you want me to farm. That's when issues on her trade-offs start becoming more apparent. Inherently, because everything would be limited to only her using it, the amount of payoff that you get is going to be significantly lower. This would ultimately make her a much worse character, because neither you nor the second person in the server in this hypothetical will get as much out of the farm, in comparison to how much both of you would get if it were operable by both of you. Because then one person could just go do it. It's not a big event. A much more beneficial change to Winona that would fix her being a swap character would be a similar approach and design to what Willow has. Willow has tons of perks that are inherent to her, such as being able to cook on her lighter, being able to fuel fires more efficiently, and being able to cook on things over a fire a bit faster than everyone else. All of these perks are just inherent to her. They don't require too many resources, they don't require you to craft anything in particular, and are by and large all just things that she has, just starting out as a character. If Winona had things that were just inherent to her, I think she'd be seen as a much more favorable character than just being a swap character. So a good solution would be to give her more of that. Give her things like tape repairing armor and tools one time that only she could apply. Make her be able to pick things faster, make her able to bulk craft. All of these would be incredibly useful for her, and would make people stick to her as a character significantly more. Going back to the Willow idea, Willow also has a character-specific item in the form of Bernie. Bernie the bear is able to be used by other characters, but not to the same degree that Willow herself is. When Willow reaches low sanity, Bernie gets big. And when Bernie gets big, he's able to damage nearby enemies, and he's basically just an insane tank. This effect does not apply to other survivors, however, so you're gonna have to be Willow if you're trying to benefit from Big Bernie. This is one route that they can also go with skill trees. They can split it between the aforementioned perks that focus on herself more and give herself more inherent perks, and also branch out into the Bernie kind of way of thinking, in which you're able to increase the duration on generators, increase its firing speed on catapults. Things of that nature would help tremendously for Winona. Obviously, new tools and structures would help her out immensely if she just had the ability to make them. Something like a toolbox, like how they have an uncompromising mode, which I know everyone, when in doubt, mention uncompromising mode. But overall, just having a way to carry more tools is always going to be a good thing, no matter the character. So giving her a toolbox would help her tremendously. Giving her new structures overall would help kind of build into the engineer aesthetic, in which she can invent her own tools that help provide for the team and make their life more convenient. I've always been a big supporter of Winona getting sprinklers, personally. Having a way to maintain wildfires and water plants while maybe being a bit less intrusive than Flingamatics, as far as placing them down goes, and just visually, would go a long way. It could also be seen as a downside to make other characters wet when near it, or an upside during the hotter seasons. The long and short of what I'm saying is that Winona herself just needs more. And that isn't the same thing as other characters getting less. Thanks for staying with me till the end if you made it this far. I really do appreciate it. I know this kind of went off track for, you know, what you might have expected, but I wanted to get it out there just because it's something that I've been thinking about for a while. And neither of these really warranted their own entire video dedicated to them, in my opinion at least. This was the best way to go about it. That's all I want to talk about, though. Let me know what you guys think about the new crossover, and what you hope to get out of your character skill tree, and what you think of my diagnosis on Winona. But that's all I wanted to talk about, so until next time, bye-bye.